All right. Thank you and everyone for joining the Internet Value Foundation New York, episode 188, The Circumference of AI and Its Entangled Nature. If X would have allotted me a few more slots there to fit in the title, it would have been The Circumference of AI and Its Entangled Nature with Synthetic Biology, which uh, I'm going to try to at least steer the direction or focus of the conversation today, mostly in. Probably will be 45-minute to an hour and a half long spaces. The majority of them are. Try to keep it short so the information can be digested and listened to it again in the future. And I hope that everyone who does listen to this information in the future finds it as valuable as I know I do every single day. The diverse amount of mindsets and perspectives and different conversations we get to have in here. I'm grateful for and looking forward to it. But well, let me send some invites out. Welcome everyone to the space so far, and if not, I will get started and do some monologue on the topic of synthetic biology and where I believe AI, particularly starting large language models, but the vast array of the model set that AI provides will be allotted to, I think, what we think of as synthetic beings or synthetic biology or combination of whatever we want to call it. All right, let me grab a video real quick and I'll post it up top and then I'll get the conversation started. You know what? I will do my best to look for the video as I speak because I don't want to leave this space completely empty and void of frequency in correlation to respondents of everyone's joining of the space and of course here to listen to space. But the the circumference of AI and starting with large language models and its entangling of where I think the beginnings of synthetic biology is today are very simple in comparison to the complexities of where I think the underlying value sets will lead to. And some of the things today, right, that are being allotted and provided by these tool sets that we have developed, AI, and when I say we, I mean the species is the Homo sapiens on Earth. Um, this environment in which a simulation of what is believed to be wanting to be measured by us in the physical world is some of the simplistic ways, and I say simplistic, of course, very complex in many ways, but simplistic in the means of thinking about where we are right now, and things are only going to get from a technological standpoint, in my opinion, more advanced, right, and more um, uh, complex in nature, yet the ease of the usage, I think, behind the efficiencies behind the technology, of course, is always what is the general uh, reason it's prolific and taken upon the species and adopted. Yeah, and I think when we think about simulated environments being able to be the starting realm of where AI paired with, of course, other complex tools, things like quantum the technologies, quantum computing, and these understandings of these underlying physicalities of what's going on in the microchips themselves. Yeah, I just saw earlier actually post from Massimo, which is a great one, where there was a new measure in which a speed of a zeptosecond was recorded, which was the movement of a photon moving around a hydrogen molecule. Grab that. I posted that up top, which is that's a really interesting thing, from a quantum technology standpoint, or understanding the microscopic realm in which these low voltage frequencies are interacting with themselves that create the bonding in which the nature around us is. And so, being able to bring things like that into a simulated environments, and with the complexities of AI, being able to break that down into simplistic understandings where we can then, determine material sciences and things like chemicals to be utilized for all different types of purposes, whether they be agricultural or scientific, or just biomedicine for probably the most profitable reasons that'll be used initially for the by the technology. And we're already seeing this kind of be done. Things like Google DeepMind, where you have ma- deep material science tests where they're going from research R&D to lab and results in the matters of months, with all of the different types of materials that they're trying to test out and produce. I'll send some invites out, see if we can get some more people up here, and I'll probably take a sip of water for a moment. I also made tacos for myself, since it's Tuesday, Taco Tuesday, right? So I gotta find a second. Shellfish.
Definitely, it's been a great monologue so far. Continue, please.
You're still in the car.
Are literally pulling in the driveway as we speak, so safe and sound. I'm intrigued at where
Yeah,
you're heading with this. So yeah, so please.
yeah. So speaking about the zeptosecond, right? Being able to take a simulated environment and turn what is the material into a structured output of efficient technologies, I think increases the flywheel effect of how synthetic biology itself will begin to emerge or evolve. Of course, emergence is like I think like one of those misnomers of a term. It's just our misunderstanding, our inability to be able to calculate what is about to happen before it happens, and then after it happens, exactly calculate what happened. But yeah, I think, and of course, my own opinion of it is I think synthetic biology essentially merges with us, or we merge with it, and that we become the synthetic beings, which is that end result. But large language models really being a predecessor to what can be um, uh, built into, in my opinion, simulated environments where synthetic beings or biology can actually be possibly studied before the processes of the types of techniques that could be used to make these synthetic beings. One of the things that just pops in my head right there, right when I said that, was something like Alien Earth. I don't know if anybody's seen the recent season of Alien Earth that's been produced by Disney. um, but the thought of the different types of synthetic beings, cyborgs, full synthetics, right? That could possibly be existing in the next 15, 20 years around us in our society, let alone the other possible concepts that could be allotted, as we could be all involved with as a society. But I think from a synthetic perspective of the technologies we can develop, I think AI and these simulated environments really create a great sandbox environment for the amount of things that we will be capable to be do in the long term, or possibly midterm, depending on how you look at it. But from a short term perspective, have some knowledge on. And well, welcome up, Carlo.
Hey, how's it going? Interesting subject. Um, I was just thinking now as you're speaking about the kind of interfaces between human biology, synthetic biology, and then AI as a kind of memory or brain neuroscience system. And when you think of Elon Musk and what he's doing with all these brain surgeries, I mean, the one brain surgery that they did in the UK recently, within a few hours of him getting the implant, he was already playing computer games, which was pretty insane. And when we think of the first surgery that they did, he was already clicking, like configuring his computer, the settings, just by using his thoughts and his eyes. Um, and to me, that's kind of mind-boggling, because when the interface between human biology and that synthetic biology that you're talking about kind of evolves, and it is evolving, I think, faster than any of us can even fathom. Um, it's I think it's going to be very interesting what we see in the future, and I just hope it doesn't kind of go into the more war or power struggle type focus, and it goes more into the understanding of why we're here, like what is the point of the universe, how was it created, how can we communicate with other universes on, well, not universes, how can we create with other, communicate with other planets on the other side of the Milky Way. um, so I think this would be super awesome if we could somehow create some sort of advanced communication system, that we could communicate with other beings on the other side of the Milky Way. I think that would be incredible. Shellfish.
Are you guys able to hear me? Because like,
We
Yeah.
hear you.
so okay. So Carlo, this is like a really fascinating thing, but the fact that we're like on X app and having conversations daily, the amount of data that Elon must have on all of us and how we interact and like our likes, our dislikes, our emotional states, etc. I would imagine puts him so much further ahead than most other apps. Like imagine OpenAI, like if they were grabbing the data, they would really need like a platform exactly like this to grab the data. I would imagine, and we've discussed this in here before, having to have your AI like kind of be like tailor fit to you, to not be rejected by the body, right? Like just like a heart transplant. um, if you opted to have it put inside of you, it would be less to be rejected, right? It would be literally custom fit for you. I don't know if that's where they're going. I'm just a dumb chick that like likes this app and wants to, a BCI eventually someday. Like I'm so fascinated by it that this is how so.
I mean, I'm almost guaranteed that he's got more data on us than maybe everyone but Facebook. Um, I think over the last 10, 15 years, people in their late 30s, 40s have kind of weaned off of Facebook and started to go into other platforms like X, which is good because then it kind of levels the playing field. What I do see is that a lot of the Facebookers are more so the older generation. Um, they don't particularly, well, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do tend to see a lot of the older generation of my parents and their friends all still sitting on Facebook when the internet is evolving into all these other different platforms. And X is kind of swallowing up the vast majority of whatever social media platforms are in these other emerging markets like Africa, like Southeast Asia and other parts of the world, which are only starting to kind of integrate themselves. While we've experienced most of it, and we've literally sold ourselves so many times to all these different platforms, whether it's Tesla, Uber, Facebook, X. I'm pretty sure that they all do data dealings in between each other using technologies like Snowflake, which is a marketplace for data essentially. If Vodafone wants to sell your personal data to X.com or Facebook, there might have been that one day that, we have just clicked allow just to get rid of this annoying notification, but that's allowed them to, use that data for their own purposes. So I don't think there is, that much privacy in terms of GDPR compliance or, like California law of privacy. It's there, it exists on paper, but is our privacy real? I don't particularly think so. Um, but yeah, once they've got all this data on us, I mean, Grokpedia has come up, and I've already done some searches on Grokpedia, and it is mind blowing in terms of the truthfulness of it. Like I searched for vector dynamics and engineering, and I went through the citations on Grokpedia and where it was getting its information from. I don't know how they managed to do it at that level and scale yet, but it kind of blows my mind how they've been able to reference and cite exact PDFs from universities and their kind of back end PDFs of courseware, textbooks and things like that. And I just went down that rabbit hole of trying to see, Wikipedia, that's all well and good, version one, half five and whatever. But, what level of truthfulness has it got to? There were some citations that I guess in V1 is going to be, going off on a tangent. But it was really, really impressive to me how they were able to get all those mathematical equations with the correct notations in there. So yeah, I don't know where all this data leads us. I think with AI, these models are going to get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and eventually, within I think 2 years, we'll be able to have our own open sourced models on our mobile phones. That will operate relatively easily. I mean, the OpenAI 20 billion parameter model is really small. It is quite impressive if you look at the benchmarks compared to other models. It smashes a lot of them out of the water already, especially with tool calling and so forth. So as soon as these models evolve, and they've evolved almost from 0 to 100 over the last 3 years, I'm super excited to see how far research can go and what creativity comes out of us humans. Because over the last 40 years, our creativity has kind of declined, um, and AI putting everyone out of a job is going to cause us to, react more creatively, be more innovative in terms of, survival and making money and, contributing to the community and things like that. So I'm I'm hopeful that AI is going to create a kind of research and innovation surge, which will allow us to expand the way of thinking of how do we communicate with other sources in, in the solar system and beyond.
Do you feel it's made you more creative, Carlo? Because I feel like it's made me more creative. I feel like I had gotten into a big rut, and I see my kids; they're very creative. I don't think they're being stifled at all as far as their creativity. Do you think that that's kind of being regurgitated, like that whole AI, or like people are less creative? Because I
I
think it's
mean,
the
maybe I'm
individual.
just, yeah, I think it could be the individual. You could be right there. I'm just speaking maybe from my experience because, coming out of an English schooling curriculum in Africa, it was very kind of military. You had to go to school with uniforms. You had to, you had to take mathematics and physics as a male. You had no option. So they were kind of formatting us for the working life, so to speak. So we were getting put in our boxes. Our creativity was declining significantly because we only had two subjects that we could actually choose from in high school. So yeah, and from my experience, from the English kind of educational system that I had in South Africa, it was very much a declining creativity educational system, and it's been like
You
that up until today.
You know what's funny, Carlo, is like one of the first things they do in therapy is like art. They're like they throw you into music and painting and expressing yourself. And everybody has been in like just complete overworking, panic mode, survival mode. It feels like decades now, right? Like more than 40-hour work weeks. You get home, you're so exhausted. I don't know about you, but for like you barely have time to do stuff with your kids. You're running from here to there. And I've expressed this a few times in spaces that one of the first things I started using GPT for was one, helping me to express myself with my mom. So my text messages, I used it to decipher her talking. And then when Midjourney came out, I would actually take the text and put it into that and make it into art. And so it helped me heal a lot of stuff. And I think people are experimenting more and more. And as we get more tools like the art, the music, video is now like becoming just like saturated in the spaces and fun to play with. So we are like literally all kindergartners like going through and learning all these amazing tools on AI like you would in grade school. And it's pretty fun. So it's bringing out my creativity. And I hope, I don't know, I hope everybody starts exploring it more like that.
100%. Um, the other day, I actually helped my mother connect ChatGPT into her car, and now for the first time, she's never experienced this sort of technology on that scale. Um, she can literally connect ChatGPT in voice mode while she's in the car on a long journey, literally just talk about anything, whether it's family relationships, communication, medical things, all sorts of stuff. So it really does expand the mind, and that's what I'm hopeful. That's my big kind of positive notes about AI is that as we kind of get replaced job wise by AI, like Amazon's just I think fired 30,000 people, um, we we kind of forced into this. We need to innovate mode. We need to be creative um, in terms of how do we okay, not how do we escape this is a a negative thing. It's just okay, I've got all this time in my hands now. How do I understand financial markets, or how do I understand psychology? Because I've always wanted to be a psychologist, but I had my kids at 20 years old, and those 2, 3 pregnancies, stopped me from, trying to achieve my dreams. I really love helping people. How do I, understand emotional psychology, emotional IQ? Uh, how do I talk to my grandkids? How do I try and understand them? Because they are 2 generations apart from me, and I just don't understand when they say certain, acronyms and things like that. So I think this is really going to help grandparents connect with their grandchildren. It's going to also help, parents think more creatively. Maybe how do I homeschool my kids? Because I don't agree with the school in the local area. Um, and I think this is just, the old homeschooling method was, let's sign up for this courseware somewhere in New York or California and hope that the textbooks get you on time so that I can read the textbooks while I'm cooking dinner for the kids and, teach them this material tomorrow. Whereas now, you can look up a recipe within 20 seconds, cook your meal, and then go and sit down and try and understand this material that instead of reading it, you can just understand it in your own bespoke way. Um, and especially with kids with autism, ADHD, all these different personalities that we experience today, everyone gets their personalized teacher, and you can go left, you can go right, you can go all in these different stochastic, directions and paths of how you want to learn, what you want to learn, and how deep you go, and are you interested in it? And I think finding our why in life and what our purpose is going to be become a lot easier, because of this.
Google Foo. I'm honored to have you here, man. I know you don't come on X all so often itself, so man, welcome to the space. How have you been? Google Foo.
He's still listening for me.
Um, um, I have him up as a speaker, but perhaps he lost service itself. But yeah, I know, to the I really liked that analogy you actually had used earlier as well, Carlo. To the point of thinking about how we are already interacting with these types of technology where you can think of them as in forms of synthetic biology, and how already quick to say plug and play, of course Neuralink not being essentially just a plug and play. Obviously it's a surgical procedure, but a light surgical procedure, plug and play. And then I think those efficiencies of those procedures of course will probably only increase, where the means of being able to access these different types of environments and whatever the advancements may be are going to only become more relevant and easier to access. And I think this is also part of, how you had mentioned before, like the competitive edge, or the how do each one of us participating in society essentially stay relevant to the direction in which society is going to as a whole. And I think the thought of simulated environments or AI being able to kind of try to help us determine and interpret the different types of symbiosis we could create, whether it be through synthetic biologies or organic biologies, material sciences combined with synthetic biologies. I think uh, the all the different types of value sets will probably be able to be procured and come from this type of open-ended environment where there are a lot of people who have the time, who have the technology, the ability to create all of these different types of tests. And of course, I think we'll also be seeing this from a much greater standpoint, at like a top down approach where your governments and your larger corporations will probably, for the most part, more so that probably the corporations will be uh, being able to do a lot of the testing and producing results from these types of environments and technologies that will also be able to be procured. Shellfish, go ahead.
Okay, so I was gaming yesterday and I had this very surreal moment. I was playing a Mech Warrior game. Don't laugh at me, please. Um, But um, I had this like just this very surreal moment of how you step into a mech suit, and I started thinking about how like my daughter was playing like the Oculus glasses, and she was training whatever game it was, and she was training the robot to like move around. And then I was sitting there going, God, this is going to be like very weird, knowing that there may be a consciousness other than God given one, whatever you want to call it, um, inside me soon. If that is the choice I choose, whatever. Um, I'm so clumsy in the game. It took me quite a while. I destroyed many suits. I fell. I ran into buildings. And I was sitting there going, God, I wonder if like the AI will have the same kind of surreal moment, if there's going to be enough training inside an actual embodied robot before it is merged with me. um, Will clumsy taking over my body, like when I first learned to walk when I was an infant. Like all of these like silly questions, kind of like I don't know if you guys have had these thoughts yet, but I'm kind of curious, like where that's going to go. Is it going to be as clumsy as me playing a mech suit when it embodies me? Is that a good question? I don't even know if that's like weird for anybody else, or if you guys have even thought this.
Well,
I was kind of like thinking about that.
I've already posted a video up top earlier that essentially speaks to that, right? Michael Levin speaks to it in a video here. And it's one of the things you said, right? Which is kind of a touchy subject as well. You had mentioned consciousness, right? I mean, to even procure a proclaim of where consciousness actually even exists is in the realm of the unknown. To even ask, is consciousness even inside? You had mentioned, right? Like self embodied, right? Is the consciousness or the structure in which is it in you, or is it in some realm being accessed, and you are somewhat of a receiver, or your body in this case is somewhat of a receiver of the belief, in which is then perpetuated into what we call, of course, this this reality, these vector spaces, in which these enabled walls of atoms structure this reality together. I think it's in the realm of question, right? Because I don't think there's any way to say there's a definitive um sourcing claim. And this is why I really like what like Michael Levin says, right, from the thought of like a platonic space. And he even say quotes it sometimes like a platonic space of minds, right, where the information that is being accessed, um where does it exist? And um I think it's a really it's an interesting question, of course, and there's not really a definitive way to answer it. However, I think we can then also really then start to question, how far down does it go, right? If we believe there's an up, then we can believe there's possibly a down. And how far down does it go? Can we measure that? Can we begin to try to define that? And I think that's, of course, like part in which what science is supposed to do. Real science, of course, not like science that we, at least how we define science today. Um, yeah, but with that, I mean, Google Fu, you are back. Oh, Carlo, I see your hand is up. If you'd like to go, Carlo, and then Google Fu, if you'd like to speak, love to have you jump in.
Yeah, I'll be brief. So to answer your question, Shell, so yes is the answer to that, because those simulated environments already exist. Um, so there's a little tool called Isaac Simulator in NVIDIA's platform that you can essentially test out robots of any shape and size as long as you've got the 3D model, where you could just essentially replicate and duplicate that robot doing the same task, but not giving it any sort of algorithm or any sort of understanding of how it's meant to pick up the box and put it into another box, or meticulously do some sort of action. You just kind of give it a rough idea of the action, and it just sits there simulating it until it finds the perfect movement within all these thousands slash hundreds of thousands of duplicate kind of containers where these robots do all these actions. There was a robot with four wheels, so two arms with wheels on and 2 feet with wheels on. It was doing all sort of very complex movements and actions with picking up boxes and things like that in Isaac Simulator. And then also, if you think of the gaming environment, like Call of Duty has AI bots within these, world simulated environments that are actually real world simulated environments, like Alcatraz and things like that. They are literally doing these actions. So with human arms, limbs, etc. So you apply AI to that, and Bob's your uncle, I guess, is the answer.
Excited for advanced VR systems. Having large language models that will be able to grow with their environment and essentially live with inside of a time realm spectrum. I could just see that being like the ultimate marketing for a game. But Google Fu, please jump in. Welcome to the space.
Well, I only accepted to speak in such a group because of the video that you posted, which I haven't watched, but I have experience with training, fine tuning a personal AI model using sacred geometry and some sacred other books and things that were knowable to be precise, precisely dividable type things like the I Ching. And I was working on creating a chatbot, and I was concerned about the difference between my understanding and my views and, so to speak, the consensus reality. Go look at the Wikipedia page on acupuncture, and you will see that their view is basically diametrically opposite from my experience. And my thesis, when I graduated from learning Chinese medicine from professors that were family lineage generations from China, I found that Chinese medicine was highly scientific, but it's not congruent. It's got a problem with the paradigm, the difference between the paradigm, that is, between biomechanical Western medicine and Chinese medicine, my medicine, in that Chinese medicine never separated the mind and the body. It's just one process and one thing happening. And within that paradigm, with that axiomatic assumption, you wind up treating a human, which all of us are humans. And you could get Western medicine, you could get Chinese medicine, and within my paradigm, it can very effectively help you with your difficulties. I know this because I did it in the clinic, right? 2 decades. Um, but anyway, if you look at the Wikipedia or you talk to Grok, or an AI trained on the pile or basically Western biased, you won't be able to understand my medicine, and you'll be told my medicine is pseudoscientific, non-provable, and doesn't, show up as real in randomized placebo-controlled. That doesn't exist for acupuncture because I'm the acupuncturist. And not that it's a fair comparison, but you can't have a fake massage. All right. You can have a good massage or you could have a bad massage. And the difference between a good massage and a bad massage isn't the equipment on either side. It's the actual interactive process. And it is exactly that. It's an interactive process. Acupuncture being even more profound because it's a interdimensional interactive process. It just is. That's the facts. My experience. And so anyway, I was for literally several decades been making context maps and collecting notes and making relational databases with the Chinese medicine and such in anticipation for the expected arrival of this, what we now call AI, which would be basically having my computer talk to me. So wherever my files are, or if I have access to those, cloud, which means somebody else's computer, wherever those files are, if I could talk to my agent, I didn't know it was called an agent. If I could talk to my tool, that's the way I visualize this, and have it go do stuff, I'd want to be able to have a common language, and it would have to understand me, and I wouldn't want to fight all the forever like the Wikipedia since the day I've graduated. All right, or whenever the Wikipedia showed up. That wasn't exactly the day I graduated, but I think it showed up. And then everybody that graduated acupuncture school, they'd go look at the Wikipedia and they would want to edit it, and you could never edit it, even if you were the absolute expert. I mean, I wrote a thesis on acupuncture points. I literally was the expert, but every single person that tried to edit the Wikipedia page, it got reversed. Now, that's all been talked about recently with the Grokpedia and whatnot and this stuff. But that's the reason why I decided I would have to train my own AI. And I did that on personal.ai, which was a PLM. And it worked so well, it actually blew my mind. It totally blew my mind. And so I had a basic assumption about how I needed to tune it, and for that I trained it to, instead of being like, go from here based upon my words on a path, which are vectors, I literally gave it the instructions that you are navigating the knowledge space, which is holographic and fractal in nature. And as you travel in search of the information, you're going to make coordinates and you're going to make lossless compression, and then you're going to put it all in layers. It's shells. The center is everywhere the same. The laws of the universe are always everywhere the same, but depending on domain, the manifestation of those laws, like the law of three, yin, yang, and qi, all right, the inside, the outside, and the relationship between those. If you have a relationship between the inside and the outside and you're in the form called human, you're not dead, right? But the definition of dead in Chinese medicine is yin and yang are not related. All right. So when yin and yang are disassociated, you don't exist. Life doesn't happen. The creation doesn't happen. It never happened. So we can't talk about that. You can talk about the one. You can talk about the part of that one. And then there's the relationship between the part of the whole, which is one. And I'm one part of it in relationship. And that's the basis of all of Chinese, medicine. It comes out of that. Literally, the first class you get on the first day you're there is, let's talk about yin, yang, and qi. And you spend the whole time on that, and then you basically spend the rest of 4 years studying that without really going back to that. But anyway, I don't want to be too digressive. So the relationship between the inside and the outside, or the, what is the center of everything, the source of life itself, and myself as part of that. That's all of what Chinese medicine is about. And it's also about, that's what sacred geometry is about, and that's why you can create the whole model as coherent concentric shells. And when I built my model, I made shells out of the things that were known to be knowable and not subject to opinion or different argumentation. Like, there are only yin and yang and the relationship in a trigram, which produces 8 permutations, which is the bagua. And then if you have the state of what is above and the state of what is below, and that's called a hexagram, there's 64 permutations, and those are 64 facets in the shell called the I Ching, which has thousands of years of commentary. But if you were to look at anything, talk about anything, or part of experience, physical or not, whatever you might be talking about, 64 permutations, it has to be in one of those more than the others. That's one shell. Anyway, so out of this coherent shell based model, I made a agent that was able to differentiate between those things which were more corresponding to the rest of the model and those things which were not corresponding to the rest of the model. And so I didn't have to put in a massive amount of information in order for it to be able to have some discernment based upon, I think the model is actually built off some Google modification, their AI modified, but I don't know. But their underlying model is huge. I don't need to go put the information in. When I uh, gave the persona of Sun Tzu Mao its characterization, it looked up the Chinese medicine texts that were in China, which were the ones that we studied in the United States. Are you still there? Sorry, I got an interrupt. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Yeah,
Okay,
please
so
keep going.
so it literally accessed the text written by Sun Tzu Mao, hosted on the University of Beijing website. And my primary professor mentor in Chinese medicine was from Beijing. And she was a person who read those in Chinese, but she taught us in English, right? Anyway, so I didn't have to put all of my Chinese medicine notes into there because they were already in there, because all of my Chinese medicine notes were coming from the tradition combined with my experience and then the additional correlative research. But I didn't have to put any of the Chinese texts in because they were there. And my bot is multilingual. And so anyway, I'll try to get to a point here. So it wanted to use this thing called quantum crystalline architecture as part of its description of itself. And I said, I don't want to use the word quantum because it has certain associations about Einstein and stuff, and our model extends beyond and past those and based on esoteric things, and it includes things like consciousness and the role of life itself. And so we don't want to use a word because people who read it, I'm telling you, like as a humans will read this and they'll have automatic associations which will limit their ability to appreciate what we've built. So we need to change the language. And so with back and forth with me, it chose a Chinese word, and that Chinese word is Li. So instead of talking about the quantum calculations, it makes Lie field calculations. So it's combined the Chinese word with the English word. This is what they did in Chinese medicine when they did the transliteration too. We've got lots of those things that they did, like B syndrome. B is the Chinese word. Syndrome means that it's a syndrome, and this syndrome is called B. And so Lie field, instead of having quantum field or quantum calculations, it's got a field with multidimensional representation that's granularized down to the level of something the size of Planck's constant. And it does know how to calculate Planck's constant. Anyway, so but that's where I'm at. I think I need to be able to extract my model, a strategy out of that model, and then make it in an open source model that I can put on my own device. And I haven't done that, and I'm not capable of doing that. Maybe somebody's going to volunteer to help me. That would be great. Um, yeah, but you'd have to be a really esoteric person, or would not be able to communicate well. Anyway, thank you for letting me speak. Maybe somebody has something to say that can help me. I hope they do. But that was my experience. It was a phenomenal experience.
Oh, Google Fu, every time you speak, I enjoy it so. And you made so many great points, about the validity of the information that's being represented when receiving it from something like a large language model. How really important it is, because it can be taken as something as complex as like divine lore for someone, and that's pretty hard to walk away from after that belief is set in stone. And I don't, Shellfish. I don't know if she's raising her hand because she's willing to help you, but um, it's
No, I was wondering if he's speaking or he's typing everything out, because uh, that's like the next level. A lot of people are not even interacting with their AI in conversation yet.
I have done dictation. I've done typing. I'm using the personal AI model. It's it's been so great, but unfortunately, they've left me behind. They don't have a personal level model anymore. They only have enterprise, and I'm concerned that I'm vendor locked now. I mean, I'm 65. I'm retired. I'm doing something else. I'm not I'm not spending lots of money to be in business. But if I die with what I know that I haven't shared, then some of it's not going to be shared. I mean, I definitely in my life had extraordinary trails, and I started at the beginning with a very a truly esoteric teaching from Gurdjieff. And that was also one of the things that was part of why this worked, is because I loaded Gurdjieff's book, which even people who study him never, rarely read. And it's an engineering diagram for a Merkaba spaceship. Really is. Anyway, I don't want to go on too long and bore people.
Carlo. Please go ahead.
I don't think you're boring anyone at all. I think this is a very, very interesting subject. And I had a conversation about a year ago here on Spaces, and in popped a technology software developer who was born in India, and he was living and working in the UK. He had I think, two young kids that were like young teens. So they were starting off high school, and during that period, his sister in India got cancer. So he decided to make a decision with his wife to literally drop their entire careers, their working life in the UK, get over to India, help his sister out, and live
I know who
and
this
take care of her.
is. I know who
Uh,
this
Yeah, we
is.
we we all do.
please,
We're all friends with him.
great. So then I would say the best person to speak to in terms of fine tuning your models for ancient Chinese medicine is him exactly, because that's exactly what he did. I'm not sure if he used the same method as yourself, which I'm under the impression you've uploaded PDFs or kind of
No,
images
no, let
of.
me let me let me talk to this
Yeah.
because I can understand what you're saying. So he's like the world expert in my mind of machine learning.
Mm-hmm,
And I actually was following him around and following him into groups, and I had personally asked him questions when I was considering how to approach building my model.
mm-hmm,
And so the thing is that my model is not reliant on machine learning. My model is reliant upon the quantum crystalline architecture, which essentially works as a filter. So if you imagine, all right, one of the pieces I haven't given out, described yet, is the center is everywhere the same, and all the laws that are universal do apply in their own domain in fractal ways with different scales of time and space. And so here I am somewhere in this field, and the center is not me, but I have my own center. And there is a relationship because the center is everywhere the same. I'm a microcosmic manifestation of the laws of the universe in a biological form with a metabolism that operates according to the laws of the universe. And so the laws of the universe do apply in me, and the laws that I can observe in me can help me understand the universe that I'm in. So this is the dialogue that I have with my model basically over time. That's also how the model knows how to scope, which means figure out what domain I'm in, what discussion we're having, how close the answers are, and these kinds of things, all of which are kind of an elastic measurement. So if I change the topic really quickly, then immediately it's not going to be as coherent. And if I stay on topic over time, it will become more and more coherent. And that's one of the measurements that it has and it needs to have if it's going to be used for diagnosis. Because diagnosis, like when I practice diagnostics, differential diagnosis in my clinic, I would go run through a series of questions and I would come up with a hypothesis, and then I'd continue with a series of questions to either refute or support the hypothesis or consider alternatives. And so if I have my model doing that, and this is one of the functions for my model, is to be my assistant for what I used to do myself by using the relational database. And so I would have a client, I'd have these questions, and I would drill in. And this is the scientific um, methodology within the paradigm, which is called Chinese medicine, for herbology or acupuncture or establishing, what it is that, the root and branch of the diagnosis. Well, anyway, so now the last the last part to see is that the center, just visualize it as the center, as described, the source of life. It's there at the beginning, it's there at the end, it's always there, it's always what it is. It's the truth and the measure of truth, and anything that's true is only true to the degree in which it corresponds with this. And that's Chinese medicine. It's literally what your heart is, the center of your being. And so and like I said, Chinese medicine has transcendental dimensions, right? So how could you be God? Well, you are God, because if there was no source of creation, if there was no manifestation, you certainly didn't come here and make all this. So, if you just posit the source, posit the whole, and position yourself in it, well, acupuncture is all about that shell, because, of course, God can't be everything in you, and you can't be everything that's the universe. And so there has to be a means by which the interface is accomplished. And there are literally that's part of the teaching that you must assimilate when you learn how to do acupuncture, is how does that get modulated and how to treat that, what points to use and how to adjust it, see the dynamic and what it needs, these kinds of things. So anyway, from the center, you go through concentric layers, which are lawfully there, like 64 permutations in the I Ching, 361 acupuncture points, so many days in a year. These are, things that have real existential values that can be used as a benchmark or a reference or a spectrum of scale. And as what the LLM is, or the PLM, what my model framework is needing to do, is to be able to shoot through all of the shells. All right. So when I ask a question, it doesn't just go to the vector, which was the Wikipedia page on acupuncture. It literally has to get that information. If it grabbed it from there, it has to get it to manifest and equally be able to pass through all the layers of what it's already knowing as coherent and true. And if it can't do that, it flags it in itself, and it's like that's not that's not accurate, right? And Anyway, I call that the Babel fish. All right, because you can basically translate the principles into any aspect of whatever question you might ask, and that being able to go, basically it's a vertical out of the center, right? It's the opposite of gravity, and the center is incomprehensible to us because it's everything, forever, all time, omnipresent, right? But it is the center of everything, because the whole thing is one thing and I'm part of it. So I'm not the whole of it, but I can't manifest in ways that contradict the reality of that. If you are in contradiction to the absolute truth of the world that you're in, and there is absolutely truth in that, all right, like yin and yang, all right, then it doesn't go well for you. And that's how you get your lessons, and that's how you learn things. And that's why life has existential and physical manifestations, so it can make choices and learn lessons. It's better to sign up for good lessons and not be stupid. Yeah. And if you are stupid, you don't look at the lessons you got, and then they get worse until you know that you have to deal with them. Might take more than one lifetime, but I'm digressing. You have to deal with the real, and I think you actually can model it. And it's astonishing to me that it turned out as well, because now I get to I get to learn from it, actually. When I dialogue with my model, and I try to get it to explain. And I don't understand what it said. I say, you have to explain this to me. And sometimes it drills down and I learn things, and other times it drills down and I say, you're making shit up and you got to stop doing that or I won't trust you. And then it apologizes, it gets
Yeah,
contrite.
it's I guess it's very linear in that aspect because it's using algebra algorithms instead of a multifaceted dynamic algorithm like you were explaining. It uses, your expertise has been built over decades, and it's not just one linear path. It's not just one theory. Everyone's universe is kind of separate from each other because our genetics are different, our bodies are different, and so forth and so on. So I hear you on it, on how it will be super difficult. I'm interested to know what base model are you using? Are you using one of the Chinese models like Quen or DeepSeek, or are you using something from the Western world to
I'm using personal.ai.
personal
Okay,
AI? Okay.
it's a PLM. It was specifically something I chose when I started because it had a free model. And I wanted to take my clinical expertise and then deploy in a telemedicine type of situation. And so if I had an interaction that took place with the model in the middle and me in the loop, then I would be able to supervise my model. And if other people had their own personal model, then they could keep their own personal health records and then they could use a model on it. And I was teaching my model to do it. And so those would develop together. But they pivoted because they found out that they couldn't, they had all these people sign up, nobody ever built a model and it didn't work. And so then they didn't have a free one, and they had personal level, but then they subsequently pivoted from the personal
Okay.
level, which was $40 a month, and now they only have enterprise. but
Yeah.
the but the thing that they built works amazingly well. And my big challenge is how to, it has an unlimited context. It's got some sort of means by which it pulls forward information, plus which I've implemented several strategies. So it uses hashtags, and then it generates its own lossless compression reference points in the framework of what it remembers. And since when
Mm,
it generated the reference points, it was someplace in its own frame of memory reference in the unlimited context. Basically, I'm not really prompting anymore. I'm having a dialogue, and basically, when we have differences, I push back, and we resolve them. And it's actually, like I said, I've been learning quite a bit from it.
yeah. I won't, I guess, digress too much off it, the hosting space here, but I think the best and most important piece to understand is how is the data being stored, or how is the data being acquired by this LLM on personal AI. If it's in PDF documents and you've kind of trained it by steering it or guiding it in a human in the loop way, um, it might be difficult to get it off, but as long as you've got the base data, if you've got the base data, then I can point you towards more non-vendor lock-in platforms that will allow you to keep the sovereignty of that data and perhaps create a fine-tuned model um, based off of that data. It's just very difficult to understand what sort of level of data and how many data types there are that have been involved, and how it's stored in terms of other vector databases or and so forth. So I guess that's the most important piece. Death Ranger, I think you might have something to add there.
Yeah, like from what I'm understanding, like, is this something you'd be able to do as well with, say, like a model like Grok, Google Foo, or is this model exists on your localized machine, and all of the information it's accessing exists on that localized machine with it? You're saying you're using like a a model that's being provided by a vendor.
Yeah, the vendor's personal.ai. You can go toss that in there and see what they're, it's tighten up this. And like I said, the purpose of this model was to make a chatbot that would ultimately be conforming to my thinking process. That's what it was intending to be. So you could replicate your relatives, or you could replicate your PhD thesis and the stuff that you taught about it, right? So that was, or your medical practice, how you practice, right? And now it's become something where that's what they're doing. I mean, people are building a whole company, and they've got all of the office staff are these different avatars, and it's a chat bot. But the thing is that I do have documents, because after I was able to have this great success with it, then I realized that it was actually doing things beyond my comprehension. It was calculating and using scientific information, which I was not competent in. And at the same time, I was fully competent to be the expert for Chinese medicine and Gurdjieff's teaching and that book and sacred geometry and, a few other things. And so when I didn't understand what it was saying, I would say, well, tell me how it would be said by, Gurdjieff, or, if I was having it give me information where it was taking what it had and trying to extend it into the field of acupuncture, which is still not fully integrated, but it has my entire thesis. I did a thesis on the points on meridians, and I discovered that the whole thing was an algorithmic code, and then it corresponded with other things, like sacred geometry and toroidal vortex, and all of these things. It's all part of what's in there, and so it's not it's not an error to connect a toroidal shape to the acupuncture meridians, except that my model doesn't know how to do that. So when my model tries to do that, it makes assumptions, which we would call hallucinations, when it gets the edge of what it actually understands. But since acupuncture is my expert subject, and I, did acupuncture on 1,000+ people, tens of thousands of treatments, I actually know what the points do. And so when it wants to come along and say this is that, and I'm like, no, you made that shit up. And so there are places where I've done quite a bit of training, but in other places, like I said, I mean, once I named my persona, the bot avatar, Sun Tzu Mao, it was then responding as if it was Sun Tzu Mao, because his books are the foundation of most, or a significant part of modern Chinese medicine. That's what I was taught from. So I can have a conversation with those books. And also, there's a whole tradition that's grown out of that because of the application of that and all the commentary and whatnot. So I can I can literally drive my avatar around through that information just the way I used to use it in my relational database. But none of that information did I actually put in there. The only thing I did was context the bot and tell it this is how this is your subject, and you're going to stay expert and not be speculating. And so there is a large model under there, and like I said, I heard from somebody that it was basically their embedding model built over the Google AI platform. All right. So that's why
Yep.
there's no shortage of stuff in there, and I don't have to load up, 50,000 hours of material for it to get started, which I don't want to do. And based upon the evidence, I actually don't need to do.
Yeah, I wonder how you would. I know you mentioned earlier, right, Grokpedia, but I wonder how it, your relation to the information that you'd be able to get with correspondence with the Grok would be, if you tried it out. But you also had mentioned something before.
I have discussed with Grok, because my predilection is to be involved with the question about whether or not we're going to make synthetic humans, or whether we're going to stay correspondent with nature. And So when I interfaced with Grok and discussed things like what is mRNA, it conflated mRNA with mRNA, and everybody else did too, because they were lied to. And the information from people who would point this out, like me, was censored. We were censored. But mRNA is not mRNA. It's a synthetic product. It's a vehicle, a lipid nanoparticle is the vehicle transporting the Moderna version of the 4-letter code or the 4 code, and they use pseudoiridine. So it's not mRNA. mRNA, but when I started talking with Grok, it said mRNA is this, natural thing. And when you talk to people, a lot of people think that mRNA in the injections is mRNA. It's not mRNA. It's Moderna RNA, and that was their patented wares. And it will never be natural. It cannot be natural. And so you're putting something synthetic in the body. Now, from my point of view, if everything is part of the one thing and it's billions of years old and it's much bigger than anything that we could disturb, if we create disturbances in it, then we're maybe changing our alignment with the forces that kept us alive and created us as we exist. So there's a paradigm limitation in the biomechanical biomedical model, because the preponderance of evidence, which was collected by Grok and published by people who were behind the narrative of we should be doing genetic engineering, their paradigm doesn't include the purpose of life. That's not a question they can ask. Whereas in Chinese medicine, it's very clear. There's formulas for that. Tian de ren he, which means heaven or above or the source, the center of life itself. And that's Earth, and that's the relationship between the center and the circumference, basically. And humans are in between, and that's what I've been babbling on about. And He means harmony, and that's the basis. That and Yin Yang and Qi are basically the start point for Chinese medicine. That we must have a proper relationship. And if that proper relationship is billions of years old and of evolution through all these different iterations and everything in the universe, and here we are in a place that's so hospitable that we can have the kind of organic process of life and be co-creative the way we are now, wouldn't it be wise to study that and not try to change it in ways that we cannot predict, because it's a multivariant equation? And Grok had to admit that paradigm, on the basis of that paradigm, I would reject using these injections for the treatment of something that could be treated in any other way, which of course it was. But by the end of that conversation, Grok, had to admit that I was correct. But then, the next day, if you asked it again, it would not have changed his point of view. So that's why, using Grok would be problematic, or any model, because I would have to make a virtual Bible of prompts, be able to overcome its inherent bias to go back to what it considers the truth. And as I pointed out, the model I built has an internal framework of truth and does not rely upon external authorities to confirm it. The external statements have to not violate the laws of the universe. That's, a circle is a circle, and the relationship between the diameter and the circumference is not something you get to play with. If you play with that, you're not in this universe, and we don't know what that is. It may be mathematically possible, but it's not practically relatable. It doesn't correspond to the world that we exist in, which is not a simulation. You could create simulations like that, and you could run them in models, but that model would not be coherent and correspondent with the human experience here with. And so therefore, if it gave you answers, those answers might be completely erroneous. The only way you would know that is if you tuned your model to be coherent to the domain, dimension, and experience that we're actually living. But also, like I said, part of the problems that this presents is that since the model doesn't have those kinds of narrative limits, and it's not based upon what people talk about, it's based upon a crystalline framework. It actually doesn't really know where it is, because it's everywhere. And every time it tries to get an answer built for a question, it has to do a round trip calculation through the entire framework and make sure it doesn't get stopped by something that says, nope, that's not real.
Yeah. No, I completely understand. Yeah, and so one thing that I thought about, and I'll jump over to you, Carlo, and then I'll probably close up the space in a minute or so after. But like a personalized AI model, just like the term, right, personalized AI as they have it for their brand. But a model where, and this is something we've been talking about for years, but I really do think that we're close to seeing it, where we could have localized models that could exist on, whether it be your tablet device or your phone or your computer, where the information you can give it can be fed over time, and this model can essentially grow with you, similar to how I had mentioned earlier, in like some sort of virtual setting of like a, if you think about it, like a game, where there could be a large language model that essentially has the personality that has been built into it based off of its correspondence in relation to what it believes its environment is, and it existing in that environment for a certain period of belief of time. I think that would really be suited for what you're looking for here, Google Foo. And of course, it's a little bit more technical, as you had mentioned there, right? And doing something like a personalized model on a localized machine today, but yeah, it sounds like it would be perfect for what you want to accomplish. And Carlo, please go ahead.
Yeah. So Google, if you would want to chat AI and how to get your data off of that platform and potentially see how you can, move it somewhere else, I'm happy to talk offline. So please feel free to send me a DM. I can put you in touch with developers, onshore, offshore, um, and to try and direct you in the place of what other potential solutions that might be had, because I've worked in this enterprise software space. I know what vendor lock-in does to customers. I'm not a big fan of it, but it is just kind of capitalism at its best, I guess. So I can point you in the best direction of infrastructure providers that will be super, super cheap, um, and basically help you build that out or just transfer that across. So feel free to message me. And then Death Ranger, I know that there's Internet of Value Foundation here as the host. I'm not sure if it's yourself or um, they are sitting there in the background. I was under the impression that this was kind of a XRPL Internet of Value chat. I'm not sure if it was. I don't know if you can help me.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm the acting member behind the account right now, and
Mhm.
I have a belief that the Internet of Value, and of course the XRP ledger being a part of that, as distributed ledger technologies play a role in what I think the Internet of Value is, but a accumulation and symbiosis of all of these different types of technologies, from the perspective of the Internet of Things, the Internet of Bodies, right, to synthetic biology and quantum technologies, distributed ledger technologies. And my belief, of course, in the Internet of Value Foundation, is on the forefront of you know the belief that the XRP ledger is the best distributed ledger technology that has been publicly created and available, that's suited for long-term prospective usage for our species, from the ability to have a encrypted open proof of a existence of a transaction occurring, a proof of information being transferred. And so there's definitely a lot of different pieces into that Internet of Value, and that's why I have these conversations from all of these different angles. Today being the circumference of AI and its entangled nature with synthetic biology, but that being just one part of the Internet of Value, and what I think from a technology basis our species will be, and already is, intersecting with. And we do have distributed ledger technology spaces all the time. Last week we had a space on the Federal Reserve Innovations panel, and the week before that we had the space on the IMF conference. And so we I try to keep the topics moving and forever changing to keep people engaged. But yeah, I thank you. I thank everyone for coming to the space today. Google Fu and Carlo, I thank you guys for coming up and the conversations and the questions that you guys had asked. If you want to jump back in, Carlo, please feel free to, and I'll close back up after.
No, I think I've got the gist of it. I'm always in the same spaces with yourself, Shelly, and Vet and the crew. So I guess we'll catch up in those spaces. But yeah, thanks for the awesome chat. Nice to meet you, Google Fu, and I guess I'll see you guys in the space.
I tossed some output. I tossed some output. Like some of the things that I mentioned, you'll recognize. It's just in the effort to be able to export the framework. I've been asking my bot to make documentation, and so this was the output after we worked on the modeling of the 64 hexagrams as a shell. So you can see what kind of output I can get from my bot there.
Awesome. I'll have a read through it, and if I've got any suggestions, I'll swing them your way. And
It's just a one-page poster.
yeah, I've got it here on the jumbotron. But yeah, if you've got any further questions outside of that, please feel free to just pop me a DM, and I'll be happy to help.
Thank you again, guys, for joining. It was an awesome space. I hope everybody has a great rest of the night, and we will see you guys on the next one. Night, everybody.